Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, after the Soviet Union collapsed, you had the countries of the former Warsaw Pact, Eastern Europe, and they were kind of in limbo. Many of these countries had been invaded either by the Russian Empire, by the Soviet Union. They didn't really have any place. And so it was the right thing to do was to include them in NATO to make sure that, I mean, there were territorial disputes between a number of these countries, Romania and Hungary and
Right.
others, to make sure that they were democratic. So this was not a mistake. And, you know, in hindsight, we can say if Ukraine had been a member of NATO, Russia wouldn't have invaded it.
What do you want? I can't imagine the history today, Angela Stent, back to when you and I were trying to figure out the height of the Berlin Wall. What do we want to do here so we don't have a domino theory in Europe? Mr. Stubbs of Finland is really worried about that, isn't he?
He is. And you noted that all of these major European leaders are going to accompany President Zelensky today in the White House with President Trump to make sure that he doesn't just sell Ukraine short. I mean, what they want to make sure is that Russia ends this war and doesn't have designs on other former Soviet states or even on rolling back the NATO enlargement. So I would say the stakes are pretty high today in the White House, and the European leaders do not want a repeat of what happened to poor President Zelensky, that dressing down a few months ago in the Oval Office by President Trump and Vice President Vance.
So, Angela, in reality, what is a verifiable win today for Mr. Zelensky and the European leaders?
Well, a verifiable win would mean that President Trump is not going to try and persuade Ukraine that has to give up territory that Russia doesn't even control. I mean, just yesterday, President Trump again said on Truth Social, it's up to Zelensky to end the war. It isn't up to Zelensky. He didn't start the war. The Russians started the war. So it's to make sure that Zelensky doesn't have to give up territory he doesn't control, and to get President Trump to agree, which we have hints on, that if there were a settlement, if the war were to end, that the U.S. would back the Europeans up in security guarantees for Ukraine to prevent Russia from waiting a few years and then attacking Ukraine again, and the U.S. agreeing to help the Europeans doing that.
And it seems like the reality is Mr. Putin has no intention of stopping the war. What's to prevent him from just dragging things on?
Yeah, that's the heart of the matter.
That's kind of it here. And he's got an American president that may allow that. Who knows?
Right. I mean, it's going to be very difficult. You know, President Trump completely reversed himself. He went into the discussions in Alaska saying there had to be a ceasefire first, and then they could discuss the conditions. And now, so, I mean, the thing that the Europeans and Ukraine have to do today is to persuade President Trump that that's just not viable, and that they have to push for a ceasefire first.
Across the nation and around the world, Angela Stent with us this morning from Brookings Institution. Angela, the FT, I mean, they don't sugarcoat it. This is an editorial from the Financial Times of London. Donald Trump's Alaska summit with Vladimir Putin was an embarrassing failure. Worse, it was a terrible mistake. And what I find interesting, Angela, let me quote this exactly. For the Europeans, it means pushing back more assertively against Trump's alignment with Putin while appealing to congressional Republicans and members of the administration who surely have grave misgivings about the Alaska fiasco. I mean, Angela, that's an incredible to-do list for Europe. Who will lead that assertive pushback of NATO? Does it come out of Brussels, or is it every nation for themselves?
Well, I think the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, the former Netherlands Prime Minister, he seems to be a leader in this. I mean, we have the other leaders there, the British Prime Minister, French President, German Chancellor, the Italian Prime Minister. They'll all try and push, but I suspect that Mark Rutte will be the leader here. But it's a huge, tall order for them because they're very concerned that the U.S. will just kind of abandon Ukraine, and that it's not only Ukraine that's going to be threatened by Russia then, but the whole of Europe.